We're here with a great panel. Thank you, Emma, Debbie, Paul, to talk about why investing in our green economy is investing in your future as well. Let me ask you a question before we get started. Raise your right hand if you believe that each one of us needs to do what we can to be a faithful steward of our planet. All right, that's pretty good. Keep them up. Raise your left hand if you think the federal withdrawal from climate leadership and regulatory rollback means the time to do this is now. All right. Amen. Hallelujah. Namaste. So we're preaching to the choir. So we're not going to talk about why, because we've answered why and when right now. The panelists are going to help us explore how. How can we do it? Different types of capital, different strategies. And we have a fantastic panel. So come on out. Clay Dumas, Chief of Staff and Partner at Lowercase Capital. Mohammed Zia, EMA Corporate Board Member and Tech Entrepreneur. Dipendar Saluja, Managing Director at Capricorn Investment Group. And Johanna Wolfson, Principal at Prime Impact Fund. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, audience. We're going to go down the row. We're going to talk to some of the capital providers about their structures and strategies, and then we're going to hear from an entrepreneur about how well these capital providers are supporting the needs of environmental entrepreneurs, or not. I'd like to start with Johanna. Prime has a really interesting hybrid funding model. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how that works, and ways in which that structure may allow Prime to go first, be catalytic, and bridge capital gaps in environmental innovation.
Great. Well, delighted to do that. It's so great to be here. So Prime is investing in very early stage companies that could have an enormous difference in climate, that could remove gigaton scale carbon emissions from the air, or avoid emitting in the first place. And we're investing in companies that are not going to be supported right now by traditional capital. And when I say early stage, I mean companies just launching out of the lab, launching out of the university, because there's a capital gap between where government R&D funding can get a project and where a company needs to be to obtain venture capital in most cases. And when you're caught in that middle ground, it's really hard to start a company. And what I get worried about is things that are dying on the vine at a time when we don't have any time to spare in bringing transformative solutions into the world to address climate. So we're an early stage venture fund. To an entrepreneur that we support, we look just like a regular early stage investor, but there's a twist. And the twist is that we're using philanthropic catalytic capital to support companies. And what that means is individuals, families, and foundations that actually use their charitable, tax-exempt dollars to support companies at this earliest stage. And this is actually something that's been on the books. Foundations, individuals, and families are allowed to do this with their grant-making dollars, with their donor-advised funds, but it happens very rarely. And so Prime was formed in 2014 by my colleague Sarah Carney to enable philanthropists to do this, to partner with philanthropists to find amazing companies that are just a bit too early or too risky for traditional venture and bring those forward to the next stage so that they can be supported by traditional venture. And I have to get a shout out to two people who are here today. Jaden Smith, who's with us. So the Smith Family Foundation is actually a very early mover in this work, worked with Prime from the very beginning to support a number of companies. Drew Fitzgerald has been an advisor from the beginning. And they've really helped us, along with a few other pioneering families, pave the way for many, many more people to do this. So now at Prime, we've worked with over 90 philanthropic partners, ranging from foundations to individuals to donor-advised funds and family offices to put their charitable capital to work in a way that has never been done before at this scale, and to support companies to the point where they can de-risk their technologies, prove out a business model, and get them to a point where it makes more sense for traditional or other types of finance to come in, see the value proposition, and take those companies to the next stage.
That's fantastic. Are you guys still welcoming new philanthropic partners?
Yes, absolutely, all the time.
That's good to know. This is the place to be. Dipendar, different strategy at your organization. Tell us a little bit about Capricorn and its structure, and help the audience understand, when we're talking about impact investing, that means a range of things to different people. Some folks, it means additional risk, uncompensated risk that requires philanthropic support. In other cases, it doesn't imply subsidy or sacrifice of returns. I'd like to just hear about your mandate at Capricorn and how you pursue both financial and environmental outcomes.
Sure. So we actually kind of pick up where Johanna and Prime sort of move companies towards. So we, for the last 15 or so years, have been investing capital in companies that develop technologies to get us out of the stone age of energy and move into the next era of clean tech, renewable energies. And we've been investing both venture capital as well as later stage capital and project finance to deploy those technologies as they get ready for mass deployment. So we've been investing in solar technologies, in electric cars, and batteries, and electric airplanes, nuclear fusion, power electronics, chips, quite a wide range. And the reason for that, again, is back to your point, our mandate, which is to invest in companies that can be highly profitable, can scale to become large companies, to essentially take over new areas, and have a very positive impact during that process and eventually when they scale. And scale is really important because one of the things, as Johanna mentioned, this is not a problem that we can just admire and kind of say, great effort. This is really something that needs to become mainstream, and we literally have to re-engineer a massive part of the global economy and a very important part of what humans use on Earth, which is energy. And if you look at the global growth of GDP over the centuries, all growth has been tied to energy. I mean, energy and growth have sort of gone hand in hand, and you've seen the peaks in growth come with energy. So as long as humans are striving for growth, which is essentially one of those things that has happened since the beginning of time, there is going to be demand for energy. And energy usage is one of the biggest drivers of global emissions today. And so we think this approach is very viable and, frankly, one of the most important ways to do it. And that is because unless you get trillions of dollars around the world to move from the old way, from the dirty, from the same way that we've been burning stuff to generate this energy, to this new way, we're not going to see this happen at that scale. And so we love that opportunity to basically make capital work for what its intent is. In many cases, some of these capital providers around the world don't really care about where their money is going. They just need a return, whether they're pension funds or sovereign funds or large corporations or foundation endowments or university endowments. And we are now playing that part in saying, let's have that capital do what you need it to do, which is get you a return, but work on things that are really important to make our goals in this low carbon, low emission economy.
I wish we had another hour or two to talk about alignment of investment outcomes with the type of planet that your investee clients want to live in. But just for a sense of scale for folks, assets under management at Capricorn, an average investment size, deal size?
So we manage about $5 billion, which in the global sense is not a very large amount of money. The space needs trillions of dollars. But for venture capital, it's one of the larger efforts in the world today, and we're very proud of that. For project finance, we were doing a few $100 million out of that, and we've now spun that out because we think that needs to raise tens of billions of dollars. For venture capital, we'll typically start at a Series A, Series B, where checks could be anywhere between $1 to $10 million. and then we'll follow on rounds. We've invested in companies like Tesla since the beginning, and we've incubated companies with as little as $500,000, and those companies have gone on to raise hundreds of millions of dollars later on.
I just wanted to draw that out because when we're thinking about investing in environmental solutions, you need a very small amount of capital and a willingness to go first on the front end. But for a long time, the growth capital opportunities have been missing. And you say maybe $5 billion is not so much money in the scheme of things. And I understand that. But 10 years ago, the idea of an environmentally focused fund of $5 billion would have been inconceivable. So it's fantastic. Yeah.
And just to make that point you were making, which is you can have technologies be born with just a few $100,000 or a few $1 million, and they can go on to become companies that are worth. Again, Tesla's a great example. Driving in, the lobby or the entrance was full of them, so it's great to see that. That company was worth $60 billion a few weeks ago, larger than GM and Chrysler, and approaching the market cap of Ford. And it started with a small venture capital investment of a few $1 million, just over a decade ago.
Have faith. Yeah. Clay, let me ask you a question. In the audience, for those of you who don't know, Lowercase Capital is an investment vehicle most notably associated with Chris Sacca. It's been one of the most both successful and visible tech investors over the last several years. And so it's incredibly exciting that Lowercase is beginning to think about strategies for climate. And so we'd like to hear a little bit about that process and how you see your role in the environmental funding ecosystem.
Yeah, so when you realize that over the next century we're going to have to pull about 1 trillion tons of carbon out of the sky, it's a hard number to look away from. It should be concerning for all of us, but from an investor standpoint, when you multiply almost anything by that many zeros, it begins to be pretty attractive. We look at this space broadly in sort of 3 big buckets. One is we've got to reduce emissions, and we've got to stop putting so much CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the air. That's the most important thing we have to do, but it's also an area that has a lot of people working on it. And there's actually quite a bit of money we need to have more, and we need more innovation. There's quite a bit of money, thanks to people like Dipendar, who are working on investments in those areas and have been at it for a while now. The second bucket, because we've been too slow to limit our emissions, is we've got to figure out how to pull a ton, not just a ton, but 1 trillion tons of carbon out of the sky. And today we have no idea how to do that. So from an investor standpoint, that seemed like a really good area for us to focus, especially as seed stage and angel investors. And I think a couple years ago, Chris has been working on this for a long time, and he's invested in Uber and Twitter and Stripe and all these companies super early on. Realized that not only is this something we have to do because we've all got to be working on climate, but this is an opportunity, and these next few years in particular are going to be a time when some really, really big companies of the 21st century are built. And so this is a time to dig in and get to know the space. And by the way, the third category, which is not a place to invest dollars to make money so much, but something we do have to be thinking about, is just how we deal with heat between the period when we reduce emissions, pull carbon out of the sky. There's probably going to be a few years where it gets very hot and uncomfortable for a lot of people in the world, especially people who have very little responsibility for putting us in this mess. And so that's also an area we think about, is how to mitigate heat stress.
Yeah. That's one thing. I don't know to what extent it informs any of your investment strategies, but there's the technical challenge of reducing the progress of carbonization or reversing it through decarbonization technologies. But there is an important social justice component in the sense that the wealthier communities are going to be able to adapt in certain ways, and there's a really regressive impact of climate change. Does that inform any of your strategies on the investing side?
So I'd love to extend that thought from a global context point of view. So I think what we're all aware of is that our sort of quota of carbon is almost full at this point, right? In fact, most people would argue that it is full, and to Clay's point, we need to start drawing down. But just think about what's happening in the rest of the world. We have two behemoths, China and India, about 1.5 billion each, roughly. They're just starting out on this journey that we've kind of made. And by starting out, I mean between the continent of Africa, the subcontinent of India, and China, most of that region is using energy, which is a 10th, a 20th, a 30th of what we use per capita. Most of that region has car ownership, which is a 10th or a 20th or a 30th of what we have in this region. And their goal today, you go there and every man, woman, and child is striving to have a quality of life like ours, which means they don't want to be a 20th, a 30th of what we are. They want to be at parity. And that's in the context of our global budget of carbon being full. So as they move through that journey, we just cannot afford to have that journey be anywhere close to what our journey has been for the last 100 or 200 years. It has to be different. There's just no choice. In the country of India alone, in the next 10 years, 500 million people will buy their first car. 500 million people will buy their first car, and they will buy that, or they will strive to buy that car. And so the numbers are just staggering when you start thinking about what's ahead of us. Even for something like food, in the next 50 years, we will grow more food than we've grown in the entire 10,000 years preceding us. So the numbers are like we've never seen before. And so, again, it's a very exciting opportunity as a result of that as we try to face that challenge.
Yeah, I would just put a pin in that and just say for folks in the audience that, when you're talking about environment and investing, you can have local strategies. Yesterday there was a great panel on community gardens and school gardens. You can look at a global framework. You can look at reduction. You can look at efficiency. There's no end to the ingenuity we need. Let's move on to the ingenuity. Mo, you're our entrepreneur on the panel. Love to hear about some of the projects that you've been involved in or currently involved in. And then in the context of these capital providers, sort of what it takes to get somebody to go first and get a new idea off the ground, ways in which the capital marketplace works well or maybe not so well from your point of view.
Sure, I really feel surrounded by the sharks here, so but it's good to have all three of them, and they're going to be fighting to invest in my projects. I'll count them. So, no, currently I'm working, my current projects, there's about 3 projects that are well-funded, and beyond the startup phase, and I'll talk about, there is more than, I see it as a triangle, so I see there is 3 different very important entities that are involved when we talk about any project. So first is obviously the entrepreneur itself that comes up with an idea maybe and then executes it. And then you have the funding side of it, the capital funding side of it. And the third and the most important side is the consumer, because without that, no idea is ever going to take off. And consumer behavior is more important. And depending on when you're talking about energy, I came from working with Southern California Edison for 10 years, and I was involved in deploying their 5 million smart meters. So that's my background. Then I turned around and start working on some of these other projects. So it's very important for any one of these projects to first understand the one side of the triangle, which is the consumer side, and understand, are they willing to adopt it? Am I willing to give up my gas guzzling car and buy a Tesla? Because most of these projects, most of these products will come up with a markup. Any one of these new technologies will have a little bit, organic food, they're a little bit more expensive than anything else. So is the consumer ready for it? And it's the entrepreneur's job to make sure that they're ready. So from an entrepreneur perspective, do you have the right catalyst on your side to make that change happen in the behavior so people are willing to pay a little bit more for your product? Where they can just have a choice. Either they can buy this product or that. And obviously for the third piece, so what I learned is that in terms of my projects, I have been more successful raising funds from more of a family funds, family offices. Why they're a little bit more forgiving and they're a little bit more socially aware. They want to make a change, right? And they follow this thing called a double bottom line. So they have the ROI that they have to meet. Obviously, they have a series of investors in their fund, and they have a number to meet. They also have another bottom line, which is mostly for social aspect of it. So that's where I appeal to. So one of the projects that I'm working on it has to do with estate planning. So how many of you guys have wills or trust funds? Anybody here?
I will.
That's rare, right? So all of us will have to have, and I'll kind of connect it back to the environment itself. So it's very important for us to have a trust or a will, because all of us will pass away. So one of our business partners and we decided to do all of that online. So we're a competitor to LegalZoom, and we're also partners with DocuSign. So in terms of DocuSign, they have done amazing for the environment. Millions of trees saved. If you can line up the paper they have saved, you can build a 3,000-story building. That's how much paper they have saved. 2.5 billion gallons of water has been saved in terms of the. So from a product perspective, when we talk about a product, it's not we always focus on the end product itself. It's really three phases of it, right? Are we actually green when we're manufacturing the product? That's the first phase. The usage of it, are we actually green when we're actually utilizing it? And third phase is disposal. So we always talk about electric cars. What happened to the batteries when the life of the car is gone? So they have to be disposed themselves as well. So one of the products that we build, it's called Modern Trust, and we're doing estate planning. Everything is online, and we made it available to everybody in the world rather than just the rich. It's, because usually a trust fund will cost you a couple of grand. We're doing it for like $200 per person. We're on track to do about 1 million trusts this year. So we're very excited about it. I partner with a law firm from Orange County, and they were all about the green environment. So that was one of them. The second project that I'm working on is IMDb for athletes. So IMDb for athletes is that we always see the fun size of athletes and the stats and everything else, but we never get to see their what else they're involved in. So this database that we're building is a project that is mostly backed by Aaron Rodgers and his team, NFL athlete. And so we're exposing the soft side of athletes in terms of what charities they're involved in, what other work they're doing. And then the consumer can get then attached with those projects with the athletes and make a difference. So that's the second project. So that's what I've seen so far in terms of personally raising the fund. It's better to be aligned with the family office, and they're more forgiving in that sense. And they look at the bigger picture, not always the bottom line. They usually have a double bottom line. That's what I call it.
That's cool. I want to segue from that discussion about athletes putting a broader profile and highlighting their charitable activities as a way to kind of wrap this up. I want to talk to the audience. When we're talking about investing, we're not obviously talking about stocks and bonds here. What we're talking about is thinking about what assets you have, what uniquely you control, and how you can contribute those assets to an environmental or a social innovation to drive some type of return, financial return, environmental return, what have you. If those assets are charitable, great. If it's return-seeking capital, great. If it's reputation, if it's influence, if it's expertise, if it's corporate business development opportunity, if it's access to public sector infrastructure, these are all ways to think about, or even if it's only your consumer behaviors, or ways to change norms within your community. So I think everybody needs to think about this. In our own work at GoodCompany Ventures, we just wrapped up a program that we launched here at EMA 2 years ago. Thank you, Debbie and crew, where we leveraged $500,000 of philanthropic capital, $5 million of return-seeking impact capital, generated $3 billion of social impact, and so kind of build a capital stack, but along the way, drew on inputs from academia, from corporate partners like Google and NBC, from business mentors. So whatever assets it is that this audience possesses, and this audience and the EMA network possesses a lot of assets, I just hope you walk out of here thinking about ways in which you can apply them for their highest and best use in trying to save our planet. Thank you very much. Thanks to the panel.